The snow crunched under Park Do-won's boots as he walked through the ancient forest. The winter wind bit at his face, but he didn't mind. He had work to do. His backpack was heavy with scientific equipment, and his breath made little clouds in the freezing air. Do-won was 28 years old and had been studying these forests for 5 years. He worked as an environmental researcher, trying to understand how the climate was changing. Today, he was looking for samples of old ice that could tell him about the past. -25 degrees Celsius, he muttered, checking the small thermometer on his jacket. Coldest winter in 40 years. He adjusted his thick gloves and kept walking. The forest around him was silent except for the occasional crack of a frozen branch. The trees here were very old. Some had been standing for hundreds of years, their dark trunks rising like pillars into the gray sky. Do-won loved these quiet giants. They made him feel like he was walking through history itself. He stopped at a clearing and put down his heavy backpack. This was where he would take his samples. He took out his ice core drilling equipment and started to set it up. The machine wasn't very big, but it could drill deep into the frozen ground to collect samples of ancient ice. As he worked, Do-won talked to himself, something he often did when he was alone in the forest. "Let's see what stories you have to tell us today," he said to the frozen ground. He typed some numbers into the small computer attached to his drill. Everything seemed normal at first. Then something strange happened. The computer screen started showing unusual readings. Do-won frowned and tapped the screen, thinking it might be broken from the cold, but the readings didn't change. According to his equipment, there was something buried in the ice that shouldn't be there, something that was giving off energy. "That's impossible," Do-won said. He moved his equipment a few feet to the left and tried again. The same strange readings appeared. He tried one more spot. Again, the same result. Do-won sat back on his heels and thought carefully. He had 3 choices. He could ignore the strange readings and go home. He could call his research center for help, or he could investigate by himself. The sun was still high enough in the sky. He had time. He chose to dig. Do-won took out his manual digging tools and started to work carefully. The frozen ground was hard, but he had experience. Layer by layer, he removed the ice and frozen soil. His back started to ache, but he didn't stop. Something told him this was important. After 2 hours of digging, his shovel hit something that wasn't ice or dirt. The sound was different, like metal, but softer. Do-won's heart started beating faster. He put down his shovel and started brushing away the frost with his gloved hands. What he found made him sit back in shock. There, buried in the ice, was something that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. It was a smooth, oval-shaped capsule, about the size of a bed. Its surface was made of some kind of metal Do-won had never seen before. It was dark gray with strange patterns that seemed to move when he looked at them directly. "This can't be real," Do-won whispered. But it was there, right in front of him. He took off one glove and reached out slowly to touch the surface of the capsule. The moment his fingers made contact, something amazing happened. A soft blue light started to glow from the patterns on the capsule's surface. The light spread like water flowing through channels, following the strange designs. Then, as Do-won watched with wide eyes, part of the capsule's surface became clear, like a window appearing in the metal. Do-won gasped. Inside the capsule was a young woman. She looked like she was sleeping peacefully. She wore beautiful clothes that reminded Do-won of traditional Korean royal garments, but they were different somehow, more complex, with patterns similar to the ones on the capsule. Her face was serene, and she didn't seem frozen at all, despite having been buried in the ice. There was a small panel near where his hand had touched the capsule. On it, Do-won could see some writing in an old style of Korean. He could just barely read it. Kim Haen, Royal Science Division. The capsule started to make a soft humming sound. More lights began to appear along its surface, and Do-won could feel it warming up under his hand. He pulled his phone out of his pocket with shaking fingers, but there was no signal here in the deep forest. He was alone with whatever was about to happen. The humming grew louder, and the capsule's surface became warmer. Do-One watched as frost melted away from it in streams. The clear panel showing the woman's face began to glow with a gentle white light. Then, as he watched in amazement, the woman's chest rose with a breath. She was alive. Do-One's scientific training told him to back away, to call for help, to document everything. But something stronger kept him there, watching. The woman's eyelids flickered. Her fingers moved slightly. The capsule's humming changed tone, becoming higher-pitched. Then her eyes opened. They were dark and clear, and they focused immediately on Do-One's face. She blinked once, then again. Her lips parted, and she spoke in Korean, but it was an old-fashioned way of speaking that Do-One had to concentrate to understand. "The awakening protocol has begun," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "You who have found me, please identify yourself." Do-One swallowed hard and answered in his best formal Korean. "I am Park Do-One, an environmental researcher. I found your capsule buried in the ice." The woman, Kim Hae-in, according to the panel, nodded slightly. "How long?" she asked. "How long has it been?" Do-One noticed that the capsule was now opening slowly, like a flower blooming. The top section lifted smoothly, releasing a soft mist into the cold air. "I don't know," he said honestly. "The ice you were buried in is very old. When are you from?" Hae-in sat up slowly, her movements careful but graceful. "I entered the sleeping chamber in the year 1724, during the reign of King Gyeongjong." She looked at Do-One's modern winter clothes, his equipment, his phone in his hand. "I suspect much time has passed." Do-One's mind raced as he did the math. That's 300 years ago," he said. "It's 2024 now." Hae-in closed her eyes for a moment, taking this information in. When she opened them again, they were filled with a determination that surprised Do-One. 300 years, she repeated. "Then it is time. The threats we foresaw must be near." She tried to stand, but her legs were weak. Do-One rushed forward to help her, supporting her arm. Her clothes felt strange under his hands. The fabric was like nothing he had ever touched before. "Careful," he said. "You've been in there for a very long time. Take it slowly." Hae-in gripped his arm, steadying herself. "Thank you, Park Do-One. But we don't have much time for being careful. I need to know about your world. Tell me, has humanity discovered the dangers of burning fossil fuels? Have you seen the signs of climate change? Are there others like me who have awakened?" Do-One stared at her. "How do you know about fossil fuels and climate change? Those weren't even concepts in 1724. Hae-in smiled, but there was sadness in it. "There is much about our history that isn't in your books, Do-One. I come from a civilization that existed alongside, but hidden from the Joseon dynasty. We called ourselves Youngmi, and we had knowledge that the world wasn't ready for then." She looked around at the winter forest, knowledge that might be desperately needed now. The sun was starting to set, painting the snow-covered trees in orange and pink. The temperature would drop dangerously low soon. Do-One looked at his strange companion, then at his equipment, then back at the amazing capsule that had preserved her for 3 centuries. "My research center is about 5 kilometers from here," he said. "Can you walk that far? We need to get you somewhere warm, and then you can tell me everything." Hae-in nodded. "I can walk. The awakening protocol included medicines to restore my strength quickly." She looked down at the capsule. "We should cover it. Others will come looking for it soon. Others who might not want our knowledge used wisely." Do-One helped her brush snow and ice back over the capsule. As they worked, his mind was full of questions. Who was she really? What was this hidden civilization she talked about? What knowledge did they have, and why did they hide it? And most importantly, what were the threats they had foreseen? As they began their walk through the darkening forest, Du-Wan realized his life would never be the same. He had gone out that morning looking for ice samples and found instead a mystery that was 300 years old. A mystery that, according to Han, could affect the entire world. The snow started falling again, soft and silent, covering their tracks as they made their way through the ancient trees. Behind them, buried once more in the ice, the capsule's lights slowly faded, waiting for the next time it would be needed. Do-Won glanced at Han as she walked beside him, her steps getting stronger with each passing minute. She was looking around at everything with intense interest, studying the world she had awakened to. He had so many questions for her, but they would have to wait until they reached safety. For now, the only sound was their boots crunching in the snow and the whisper of the wind through the trees. The same wind that had blown through this forest 300 years ago, when a mysterious civilization had hidden their greatest minds in capsules, waiting for the right time to wake up. The small research center looked like a wooden cabin from the outside. Du-Won helped Han up the steps, noticing how she studied everything with careful eyes. When he opened the door, warm air rushed out to meet them. "This is where you work?" Han asked, looking at the computers and scientific equipment that filled the room. Her voice was stronger now, though she still spoke in an old-fashioned way. "Yes," Du-Won said. He helped her to a chair and turned up the heat. "It's a field research station. We're the only ones here right now. The other researchers won't return until next week." Han touched one of the computer screens with gentle fingers. "Your technology. It's different from what we had, but I can see the basic principles." She smiled. "We weren't wrong about how humanity would develop." Do-Won made hot tea for both of them. His hands were shaking slightly as he put the cups down. He had so many questions, but he didn't know where to start. Han solved this problem for him. "You want to know everything," she said, holding the warm cup in her hands. "About who I am, about young me, about why I was in that capsule. I will tell you, but first, I need to know about your world." For the next hour, Du-Won told her about the present day. He explained about computers, the internet, space travel, and modern medicine. He told her about climate change, rising seas, and dying forests. With each thing he said, Han's face grew more serious. "So it's happening just as we predicted," she said quietly. "The Earth's fever is rising, and humans know about it, but haven't stopped it yet. We're trying," Du-Won said, "but it's complicated. Not everyone agrees on what to do, and changing things isn't easy." Han stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, making the forest outside look like a white dream. "Now I will tell you my story," she said. "The true story that isn't in any of your history books." She turned back to face Du-Won. 300 years ago, there wasn't just one Korea. There were two. One was the Joseon dynasty that everyone knows about. The other was Youngmi, a hidden civilization that lived alongside it, watching and learning. "How could an entire civilization stay hidden?" Du-Won asked. Very carefully, Han smiled. "We lived in valleys protected by mountains. We used technology to hide our cities. We had strict rules about contact with the outside world. We weren't large, maybe 50,000 people at our peak, but we were advanced." She sat down again and continued her story. Youngmi started when a group of scholars and inventors decided to follow a different path. They believed that technology and nature could work together. They found ways to make energy from the sun, wind, and earth that didn't hurt the environment. They learned to build things that would last for centuries. Do-Won listened, fascinated. But why hide? Why not share this knowledge? "Because humans weren't ready," Han said sadly. "We watched the outside world. We saw how new discoveries were often turned into weapons, how greed made people destroy forests and pollute rivers. We decided to wait and watch, to develop our knowledge until humanity was mature enough to use it wisely." She took another sip of tea. "I was born into this civilization. My parents were both scientists. From a young age, I studied both the old wisdom and the new discoveries. I learned about energy, about the Earth's systems, about how everything connects. Then why did you go into the capsule? Du-One asked. Why did your civilization disappear? Haiyan's face grew sad. Because we saw what was coming. Our scientists discovered that the way humans were burning coal and cutting down forests would change the Earth's climate. We tried to warn the outside world, but no one would listen to mysterious strangers with strange ideas. She stood up again, unable to sit still. Then we discovered something worse. Our instruments showed that the Earth was entering a natural cycle that would make these problems even bigger. We knew that in about 300 years, all the damage humans had done would reach a tipping point. That's now, Du-One said quietly. The climate crisis we're facing. Yes, Haiyan nodded. We couldn't stop it from happening, but we could prepare to help when the time came. That's when we created the Scattered Seeds Protocol. She walked around the room, looking at the scientific equipment. The wisest among us went into sleeping capsules, placed in carefully chosen locations around the world. Each capsule was programmed to wake its sleeper when the right person found them. Someone with the heart and mind to help use our knowledge well. Du-One thought about how the capsule had responded to his touch. The capsules could tell that. Yes, they tested not just DNA but also brainwaves, emotional patterns, and ethical thinking. Haiyan looked at him with kind eyes. You woke me because you care about the Earth, and because you think deeply about the future. The capsule saw that in you. Du-One blushed slightly. But what can we do? Even if you have advanced knowledge, the world's problems are so big. We have more than just knowledge, Haiyan said. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small device. It looked like a piece of black glass. When she held it, it lit up with the same blue light as the capsule. We have working examples of the technology we created. Plans for machines that can clean the air, energy systems that don't pollute, ways to restore damaged ecosystems. She put the device on the table between them. But we also have warnings. There are others who are watching us, waiting. People who would use our knowledge for profit instead of healing. They'll be looking for the capsules too. As if to prove her words, a red light started blinking on one of Du-One's computers. Someone had triggered the motion sensors at the edge of the research station's property. They're here already, Haiyan said calmly. Sooner than I expected. Du-One, we need to make a choice right now. We can stay and try to explain everything to whoever is coming, or we can take what we need and go. Du-One looked at his research, his equipment, his comfortable life. Then he looked at Haiyan and the amazing truth she represented. It wasn't really a choice at all. What do we need to take, he asked. Haiyan smiled and started moving quickly around the room. Just your research data, some warm clothes, and this. She held up her strange device. Everything else we can find along the way. Along the way where? Du-One asked, already pulling on his warmest coat. To find the other capsules, Haiyan said. I wasn't the only one who went to sleep 300 years ago, and now it's time for all of us to wake up. They could hear vehicles approaching through the snow. Du-One grabbed his laptop, some food, and his emergency gear. Haiyan was already by the back door, looking out into the dark forest. Ready? She asked. Du-One took one last look at his comfortable, normal life. Then he nodded. Ready. They slipped out into the snowy night just as bright headlights lit up the front of the research station. The forest welcomed them into its darkness, hiding their tracks with falling snow. Behind them, they could hear car doors slamming and voices calling out. But ahead of them lay adventure, discovery, and maybe even a chance to help save the world. Du-One smiled as they moved quietly through the trees. When he went to work this morning, he never imagined he'd end the day running away with a 300-year-old scientist princess. But sometimes the most amazing discoveries weren't the ones you dug out of the ice. They were the ones that found you. The old mountain temple stood quiet in the morning light. Du-One and Han had found it after walking through the night. following the mysterious blue light from her device. Now they sat in the temple's main room, watching the sunrise through paper windows. "We should be safe here for a while," Du-Won said. He was making breakfast with some of the food he had grabbed from the research station. "The monks let travelers stay here sometimes. No one will question our presence." Han nodded, but she was focused on her device. The black glass surface showed strange patterns of light that seemed to move like water. "There," she said finally. "I found another signal. There's another capsule, about 200 kilometers from here." Do-Won handed her a cup of instant coffee. She took it carefully, still getting used to modern food and drinks. "Who's looking for us?" he asked. "Those people at the research station." "Who were they?" "A company called Global Tech Solutions," Han said. She took a sip of coffee and made a surprised face at the taste. "They've been searching for signs of yummy technology for years. They have some old records, enough to know we existed, but not enough to understand our true purpose." "And what is your true purpose?" Du-Won asked gently. Han put down the coffee cup. "To help humanity survive what's coming. But not by selling expensive technology to rich people. Our knowledge needs to be free for everyone." She touched her device again, and a hologram appeared in the air between them. Do-Won gasped. The hologram showed the Earth, but not like any map he had seen before. It showed waves of energy moving through the air and ocean, patterns of heat and cold, flows of pollution and clean air. "This is what your world looks like right now," Han explained. "The red areas show where the damage is worst. The yellow lines show how it's spreading." She waved her hand, and the hologram changed to show the future. The red areas grew bigger, spreading like a disease across the globe. "But it's not too late," she said quickly, seeing Du-Won's worried face. "Look at this." She touched the device again, and new patterns appeared in blue and green. "These show what would happen if we used yummy technology to help heal the damage. It would take time, but it would work." "What kind of technology?" Du-Won asked, fascinated by the changing patterns in the air. Han smiled and reached into her sleeve again. She pulled out what looked like a small seed. "Watch," she said. She put the seed on the wooden floor and touched it with one finger. The seed started to glow with a soft green light. As Du-Won watched, amazed, the seed grew into a small plant. But this plant was like nothing he had seen before. Its leaves seemed to shimmer, and the air around it became clearer, fresher. "This is a purifier plant," Han explained. "We created it by combining natural plants with our technology. It cleans the air 100 times better than a normal plant, and it can grow anywhere, even in polluted soil." "That's amazing," Du-Won said. He reached out to touch the plant's shimmering leaves. "But why didn't your people share this technology 300 years ago?" Hayen's face grew sad. "We tried, once. We showed some of our discoveries to a group of nobles in the Joshin court. They immediately wanted to use our plants to make weapons. They thought the plants could be changed to produce poisons." She shook her head. "That's when we decided to wait, to sleep until humanity was ready." Suddenly, her device made a soft chiming sound. Hayen looked at it, and her eyes widened. "Someone's coming. Not the company people, but..." She studied the patterns on the screen. "It's a friend. Someone who can help us." The temple door slid open, and an old monk stood there. But he wasn't dressed like the other monks Du-Won had seen. Under his regular robes, he wore clothes similar to Han's, with the same strange patterns. "Li Jai-ho," Han said, standing up and bowing deeply. "You were also awakened." The old monk smiled. "2 months ago. I've been waiting for others to wake up." He looked at Du-Won. "And you have found a good ally, I see." Du-Won stood and bowed, feeling awkward. "I'm Park Du-Won. I found Han's capsule yesterday." "Yesterday?" Jeho laughed softly. "And already you're running from global tech and learning about purifier plants. You adapt quickly, young man." He sat down with them and took out his own device, similar to Han's but older looking, We don't have much time. Global Tech is gathering forces. They found traces of 3 more capsules. Then we need to move faster, Hayan said. She turned to Do-Won. Are you still willing to help us? It will be dangerous. Do-Won looked at the purifier plant, still glowing softly on the floor. He thought about the red areas spreading across the hologram Earth. Then he thought about his comfortable life at the research station, studying the problem but never solving it. I want to help, he said firmly. Tell me what to do. Jai-Ho nodded approvingly. First, we need to get to the other capsule before Global Tech does. But more importantly, we need to show the world what's happening. People need to understand both the danger and the hope. I have an idea about that, Do-Won said. He opened his laptop, which he had grabbed before they fled. I have friends at different research stations around the country. People who study climate change, who would understand what this means. And they have friends at universities, at environmental organizations. Hayan's eyes lit up. A network. Yes, that's perfect. We can share our knowledge through people who will use it wisely. She touched her device, and a hologram changed to show a web of connections spreading across the country. But Global Tech will try to stop us, Jai-Ho warned. They have money, influence, and their own scientists. They'll say we're frauds or terrorists or crazy people. Then we'll have to prove them wrong, Do-Won said. He thought for a moment. The purifier plant. Can we make more of them? Hayan nodded. The seeds can be grown anywhere, and once people see them working, they'll have to believe. Jai-Ho finished. He stood up. We should leave soon. Global Tech has ways of tracking electronic devices. They'll find us here eventually. Do-Won packed up his laptop while Hayan carefully picked up the purifier plant and put it in a small pot. Jai-Ho went to change out of his monk's robes. Are you scared? Hayan asked Do-Won quietly. He thought about it. Yes, he said honestly, but I'm more excited than scared. This is why I became a scientist, to help fix things, not just study them. Hayan touched his arm gently. That's why the capsule chose you. Not just because you're smart, but because you care about doing what's right. Outside, they could hear a helicopter in the distance. Jai-Ho came back, now dressed in modern clothes. Time to go, he said. I have a car hidden nearby. As they left the temple, Do-Won took one last look at the peaceful building. The sun was fully up now, making the snow sparkle. Somewhere out there, more capsules were waiting to be found. More knowledge was waiting to be shared. And maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to change the world. The helicopter sound grew louder, but they were already moving through the trees, following Jai-Ho down a hidden path. The purifier plant glowed in its pot, lighting their way like a small green star of hope. The sun was setting over Seoul as Do-Won, Hayan, and Jai-Ho looked down at the city from their hideout in the mountains. A month had passed since that first day in the icy forest. In that time, everything had changed. Global Tech's headquarters is down there, Do-Won said, pointing to a tall glass building in the city center. He adjusted the new glasses Hayan had given him, special ones that could see the energy patterns she had shown him in the temple. Through them, he could see dark red clouds flowing from certain buildings, showing where pollution was worst. And our friends are in position? Hayan asked. She was wearing modern clothes now, but she still carried herself like someone from an ancient court. The small black device was in her hands, showing more capsule signals. Yes, Jai-Ho answered. He had spent weeks contacting people he trusted, scientists, reporters, and environmental activists. They're all ready. We just have to wait for the right moment. Over the past month, they had found 3 more capsules. Each one had contained another scientist from the Youngmi civilization, each with different knowledge to share. Park Min-ho had known about clean energy. Kim Yu-mai understood how to clean polluted water. And Lee Da-yun could make soil healthy again. But Global Tech had found 2 capsules of their own. They were already trying to copy the ancient technology, planning to sell it for huge amounts of money. Their leader, Choi Ta-sik, had appeared on TV many times, talking about his company's breakthrough discoveries. He's going to announce their new products tomorrow, Do-Won said, in front of the whole world. He looked at Han. Are you sure about this plan? Han nodded. She had changed in the past month too. She understood the modern world better now, but she hadn't lost her determination to help it. The truth is the most powerful weapon we have, she said. We just have to show everyone at once, so they can't hide it. The plan was simple, but dangerous. While Choi Ta-sik was showing off his stolen technology, they would activate all the purifier plants they had grown. Hundreds of them, planted secretly around the city by their supporters. When the plants started working together, everyone would see the difference. The air quality sensors will show it first, Jai-ho said. Then people will feel it. Clean air for the first time in years. He smiled. Even global tech can't ignore that. Do-Won checked his phone. Messages were coming in from their supporters around the city. Everything was ready. He looked at Han, remembering how strange she had seemed that first day. Now he couldn't imagine his life without her. People might not believe it at first, he said. The idea that an ancient Korean civilization had this technology. They'll believe what they see, Han said firmly, and what they feel. Besides, we have proof now. The capsules, the devices, the plants. And we have you, Do-Won, a modern scientist who can explain how it all works. Do-Won had spent weeks studying the Yummy technology. It was amazing. Not just advanced, but different. They hadn't tried to fight nature. They had worked with it, made it stronger. Their machines grew like plants. Their energy systems flowed like rivers. It's time, Jai-ho said, looking at his device. The sun had set, and the city lights were coming on. Choi Ta-sik is starting his announcement. They could see the global tech building lighting up for the big event. News cameras were there, broadcasting to the world. Choi Ta-sik stood at a podium, talking about his company's revolutionary green technology. Han held up her device. Ready? She asked. Do-Won and Ji-ho nodded. All around the city, their supporters were watching their phones, waiting for the signal. She touched the screen. A soft blue pulse spread out from the device, invisible to normal eyes, but beautiful through Do-Won's special glasses. All across Seoul, hundreds of purifier plants began to glow. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Choi Ta-sik kept talking, showing off his company's machines. But then people in the crowd started looking around. The air was changing. The usual gray haze was disappearing. The air quality sensors started going crazy. Numbers that had been dangerous were dropping to healthy levels. The dark red clouds Do-Won could see through his glasses were being pushed away by waves of clean blue air. Reporters at the global tech event were distracted, pointing their cameras at the sky instead of the podium. People were taking deep breaths, amazed by the clean air. And then someone spotted the first glowing plant. Look, they shouted. Over there. More people started finding the plants. They were everywhere, in parks, on balconies, along the streets. Each one glowed with soft green light as it cleaned the air around it. That's when Minho, Yumi, and Da-Yun stepped forward in the crowd. They explained what was happening, showing their own devices, proving that this technology was meant to be shared, not sold. Choi Ta-sik tried to stop them, but it was too late. The truth was out. News cameras were broadcasting everything. People all over the world were watching as Seoul's air became clean in minutes. We should go down there, Jai-ho said. People will have questions. They took the long way down the mountain. By the time they reached the city, the streets were full of amazed people. Everyone was looking at the glowing plants, breathing deeply, celebrating. When they arrived at the global tech building, Choi Ta-sik was gone, but reporters surrounded them immediately, wanting to know everything. How did this happen? Where did the technology come from? Who were these people? Ha-in stepped forward, looking every bit the princess scientist she was. We are from Youngmi, she said clearly. We came from the past to help with the future, and we're here to share everything we know. Over the next few hours, They explained everything. About the capsules, about the hidden civilization, about why they had waited until now. Some people didn't believe them at first, but the proof was all around. In the clean air, in the glowing plants, in the ancient devices that still worked perfectly. What happens now? A reporter asked. Do-One answered this time. Now we teach, we share, we work together. He looked at Heian and smiled. The people of Youngmi didn't hide their knowledge because they wanted to keep it secret. They hid it because they were waiting for the world to be ready to use it wisely. And are we ready? Someone else asked. Heian took Do-One's hand. We have to be, she said. The Earth can't wait any longer. But we're not afraid. We've seen how people react to the truth, how they want to help when they understand what's possible. Later that night, they stood on the roof of the global tech building, watching their technology spread across the city. More plants were growing, more people were learning, more change was happening. Thank you, Heian said quietly to Do-One, for finding me, for believing in all of this. Do-One squeezed her hand. Thank you for waiting 300 years to help us. Above them, stars were visible over Seoul for the first time in years. The air was clean, the future was hopeful, and somewhere out there, more capsules were waiting to be found. But they had time now. The world was finally ready for what Youngmi had to teach. The ancient civilization wasn't hidden anymore. It was alive again, growing like their plants, spreading like clean air across the world. And it had all started with a simple touch in an icy forest when the past and present met to save the future.